Hello everyone, and welcome to Wednesday the 23rd of December. We're nearly there. We're nearly at the end of our 4 weeks of watching and waiting in Advent. We're nearly at Christmas. I hope you're well and not needing to rush around too much in these final days before the great day. If you are, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, I hope you can find time today just to stop and breathe, to think about what it's all about before rushing around again. This morning's reading is the first 18 verses of the Gospel of John, also known as the Prologue, and it's perfect for Christmas. For me, and I hope for you too, it sums up exactly what we're going to be celebrating together in 2 days' time. The wonderful and amazing truth that our God, who created all things, came into his world in human form, in that tiny baby Jesus, to be with us, to share our humanity with us, to be our Saviour. But before I get too carried away, our reading. The Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light which enlightens everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, all who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived amongst us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." This is perhaps one of the most familiar passages from the New Testament, and it's certainly up there as a winner in the most profound Bible passage competition. Only 18 verses, and yet we could get 18 talks and sermons out of it. There's so much going on in this passage, we could be here for days, and it's all written in simple yet incredibly deep terms. In fact, that's been said about John's Gospel in general. He's got a knack for putting the deepest truths into the simplest of language. There's a saying that the Gospel is shallow enough for a child to paddle in and deep enough for an elephant to swim in. Well, I think we'll be paddling today. John starts his Gospel with the prologue right at the beginning of time, not with Jesus' earthly ministry like the other 3 Gospels of Matthew, Mark and Luke, but right at the beginning, before there was anything, before all the world began. The prologue tells us that beyond time and space there was always God, and that with God there was the Word, and this Word wasn't just with God, he was God. Now, word in the English language isn't a very exciting or descriptive thing, but in Greek, John's language, the translation of the word word was logos, and this was far more descriptive. John's readers at this time would have understood this to be far more profound, because to them, logos meant creation, revelation, God speaking life into all of creation. It meant the rationale behind the created universe. It meant the mind and the purpose of God and the expression of the mind in spoken speech. In other words, it meant a great deal more than our English translation. Now, John wanted his readers to really get this. He really wanted them to be in no doubt whatsoever that the Word was one with God, that he was the Son of God. Now, we read of many other themes in the prologue too. We read about the very essence of God. It talks about darkness and the light that overcomes all darkness. It talks about life and light. It talks about witness, about John the Baptist pointing people away from him and towards this light that was coming into the world. It talks about God coming into his own creation, his own people, and not being accepted. It talks about belief, one of John's favourite words and arguably the theme of his whole gospel, and those who believe becoming children of God. And then in verse 14, at last, we get to the real crux of the passage. We read about that light coming into the world, that the Word became flesh, the incarnation. God became one of us, living, breathing, warm, the full glory of God in human form, totally human and totally divine. The human being we know as Jesus. If you want to know who the true God is, look long and hard at Jesus, because you're looking at God. Like I said at the beginning of this talk, there is so much more to be said about this wonderful deep passage. You might now have more questions than answers, and I'd urge you to have a read of it yourself. But the simple truth to take away today is this, that God is now in the world in Jesus, dwelling amongst us. Actually, a bit more than just dwelling. Again, the Greek phrase is much more descriptive. It calls it tabernacling with us, taken from the tabernacle or holy tent in the Old Testament where God was found. That holy tent, that tabernacle, was where God was met, where God forgave his people's sins, where he guided and guarded and gathered and governed his people Israel. And now God in Jesus is found in us, in all who believe, challenging our own darkness, shining his light on you and me, bringing life, guiding us, governing us and forgiving us. And this is what we're celebrating in 2 days' time. This is the point of Christmas. God coming to his people on earth in Jesus, walking with us, tabernacling in us. Emmanuel, God with us, with all who will accept him. I wish you a joyful, peaceful day where you know this. God bless you.